Software development is changing rapidly. How we do things now is not how we used to do things. AI has changed the game, but so has the economy and other outside factors. So what skills matter in 2026? Should you go into C# development at all? If you're already in C# development and you're looking for a job, what should you be doing? In this video, I'm going to lay out the big picture steps that you should take to adjust to software development in 2026. We're going to start with a reality check about what it takes to be a software developer. And then we'll get into what your goals should be, what technologies you should know, and finally, how to advance your career in 2026. Whether you are considering software development or you have been doing it for the past 30 years, this video is for you. So let's get started. And to start off, we're going to talk about a reality check. I think this is important. And to start off with, for the things that are changing for developers, number one is that jobs are hard to get now. It does not mean it's impossible to get the jobs. It does not mean that it's overly difficult, but it is difficult. And yes, you may have to struggle for 6 months or a year or more sometimes to get a job in the field. Now, there are ways to shorten that. There are ways to make sure that you don't hit into that group, but there are things that are going to happen to you where you're going to struggle to find a job sometimes. And that's because, there is more competition. The competition is higher. These two things go hand in hand for a couple of reasons. Back in the early COVID era, back in 2020 or so, 2021, companies were hiring lots of developers. And so there became this mindset that if you just had a decent resume, if you just had a few buzzwords on your resume, that you could get hired somewhere and that it wasn't that hard to get a job. But that wasn't reality. That's not how software development has been in the past, nor is it how it is now. The COVID era of wildly hiring for jobs and companies competing for developers is over. And so we're back to more of what it is normally for software development. Competition is high, and yes, jobs can be harder to get. Now, the reason competition is high is because this is a very easy field to get into. I'm not saying it's a very easy field to do well in, but it's very easy to say, oh, I've watched a few tutorials, I've gone through a couple of courses online, and now I must be a software developer, so I'm going to put that in my resume. And you're competing against those types of people. So you have to figure out how to go beyond just that. But this is the changing reality for software developers, some of whom are not used to the fact that, yes, times have changed from that easy hiring place that we were at. Number three, AI is confusing companies. And what I mean by this is there is, to an extent, the idea that companies are saying, hey, I could probably do more with less, which is always the mantra of companies. It does not matter if it's AI or offshoring or outsourcing or, freelance hiring or whatever the case may be. Companies want to do more with less, which if you take a step back and think about it, it's understandable because of the fact that we do the same thing. When you're looking to buy a new car, you shop around at different dealerships and say, hey, who has the lowest price for the same value? That's what you're looking for. Well, in the same way, that's what companies are looking for. They want more money in their own pockets and less money going to their employees. And so you're always going to figure out how to do more with less. So there's been an awful lot of talk from very large companies, including Microsoft and OpenAI and Meta and others, that are saying, we're going to replace software developers, or we're going to greatly reduce the need for software developers with our AI products. Now, you have to remember that they're trying to sell a product, right? They're trying to sell their own thing and trying to get companies on board with them, but that's what they're pushing. Microsoft is really pushing hard for every developer needs to be using AI to go faster and farther. And it's a bit unrealistic, but companies that are not those big companies, they're a bit more confused because if they say, oh, well, this is what the market leaders are doing, therefore we must do it too. And so there are companies that are trying. They're trying to hire less developers or even lay off developers sometimes, where they are expecting the AI to do the work of the developers. And this doesn't go well. It has not gone well. There has not been a company that, does this long term and goes, yes, that was a great decision. I mean, maybe it's a tiny little company that do that, but not any large scale company. So what happens instead is we see over and over again, companies are hiring back those people. And so they are bringing those developers back in, or they're trying to do other things to pretend like the AI is still working, like outsourcing development to cover their shortfalls and so on. So this is causing a lot of confusion in the industry. Some companies may be laying off because of AI. Other companies may be hiring because of AI. Some companies are looking at AI as, rightfully, the ability for it to launch them forward faster. And so they're saying, hey, you know what, let's just empower our developers and be able to do more with these tools. So instead of saying, let's pay less, instead of saying, let's just produce more, or let's, take on more projects, etc. And so there are opportunities at those companies, or maybe, there's a little bit of movement either way, but it's causing a lot of confusion in the job market, a lot of turmoil. And so that is causing some problems when it comes to hiring versus not. It's changing who is hiring, who's not. Number 4, vibe coding looks great. There's an awful lot of people out there, an awful lot of companies, an awful lot of people promoting the idea that vibe coding works. And no, it doesn't. Not in the way that most people think it does. So there's this idea that, hey, you don't have to be a developer. You can just vibe code an app and it will be great. And that's not how that works. It repeatedly is proven that's not how that works. And if you look, the people who create vibe code apps that actually work, that are actually secure, that are actually performant, that actually can be maintained long term, those are the people who are already highly skilled developers. So they're not really vibe coding in the way that they're promoting it, or a lot of people are promoting it, which is you don't have to know the topic. You just have to tell the AI to do its thing, and it does. So over and over again, it's been proven that when you just let the AI do its thing, it's probably 80% right. And then that 20% is an unsecure mess, and it creates bad code that's hard to maintain. So it's not like, well, it's good enough. And I've heard that argument. It's good enough. It's not good enough, because security isn't a good enough thing. Your data retention isn't a good enough thing. Your assurance that your data is not going to get mixed up with someone else's data is not a good enough thing. And so letting an AI just go crazy on that, that's not a good thing. But when it comes to, again, looking at how companies are looking at how people who are coming into software development are looking at it, vibe coding looks on the outside, it's got a pretty skin. It's got a pretty look to it. And so it looks like that developers aren't needed anymore. And that causes even more confusion. So there are things we acknowledge in that, and the fact that, yes, that is causing some market turmoil. But that doesn't mean that it's the right thing or a long-term solution for software development. So let's talk about the actual reality. So we talk about the changes for developers, but let's talk the actual reality. Reality number 1 is software development pays well. This is a thing that people overlook or they discount. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, it's not a good time to be a software developer. Go do something else, anything else. So I did this thought experiment with a person on YouTube recently where they were saying, hey, software development is not a field you want to get into. Go anywhere else. And it is a field that is going to take work to get into. We'll talk about that. But I said, let's just look at any other field. Let's take electrician. We're going to use US numbers. And I used the US median income, means the middle income. So half of the people who are electricians make less than this, half make more than this. And I did a thought experiment where I said, what if you got hired tomorrow as an electrician? It's not going to happen. You have to have training and all the rest. But let's just say you did, and you worked for 10 years. How long would you have to work as a software developer at the same software development median income in order to meet or eclipse the same income as that electrician? You had to work for less than 5 years. So you could be unemployed with $0 coming in for 5 years and still make out better in the end being a software developer than you could an electrician. That's nothing bad against electricians. If you want to be an electrician, you're good at it, do it. Please, we need electricians. And you can figure out ways to hopefully make more money than that. But the point is that software development pays well. And so it's worth some of this extra pain and difficulty that comes with the hard work of getting into this field, because it is going to be hard work. So when you're looking at, well, don't do that, compare it. Be honest about what your alternatives are. Not everyone should be a software developer. But if that is the field you want to go into, you can do very well. So the actual reality is software development pays well. The alternatives are almost entirely worse. Now, worse in terms of money, okay? And that's not the only way you should evaluate a career. Please don't evaluate a career just based upon money. But you need to be honest about your evaluations. If your bent, if your drive is to be a software developer, it is a great career to get into. If your drive is to be in healthcare, that's a better place for you to be probably, because that's what you're going to be more happy and more fulfilled doing. So we're just talking right now about dollars and cents, income. So too often I hear people say, don't do software development. And their idea behind it is it's hard. It takes a lot of work. It's hard to get a job. These are all things that are true. But what's your alternative? What are you suggesting that they do instead? Because it's not enough to say, don't do something, because that doesn't provide any value. It just provides a negative output. Instead, say, these are the things that are probably better, and back that up with actual data, not just anecdotal. Well, my neighbor's friend's buddy is making lots of money doing this. That's just anecdotal evidence. Look at it from the actual monetary standpoints. Software development, the career, is growing more rapidly than almost any other career in the US. It makes more than almost any other career in the US, especially for the fact that it does not require even a degree. Yes, sometimes a degree can be helpful, but it doesn't mean it's required. So it's easier to get into, and it pays a whole lot better, which is also why there's so much competition, which does make it more difficult. Okay, number 3, AI will drive job growth. And this is something that people don't realize or don't see as a possibility sometimes, because of the fact that they're locked in on the idea that AI is going to replace developers, and it's not. We have proven year after year, we've been told, well, in the next version, it will somehow get better. It'll get better. And it hasn't. Yes, there have been advances in AI, and yes, the LLMs that are putting out code are doing a better job for the most part than they were in previous versions. But what we're seeing is a small incremental change now, as opposed to this grand, massive difference in how things work. So software developers aren't getting replaced. Instead, what's going to happen is it is going to make it easier for more companies to hire less developers and still have custom development. So think of it this way. Back in the 70s and early 80s, kind of before I was into computers, well, computers were basically these big mainframes, and only bigger companies own these. And so your average mom and pop shop that maybe was a dry cleaner or a laundromat or something else, they didn't own a computer because it didn't make financial sense. So we only had a few computers relatively, and then the computer got cheaper and faster, and all of a sudden, more and more businesses owned a computer because they could afford it. And because of that, more and more businesses use software, which also gave rise to the software developer. The same thing is true here with AI, is that it's going to make it easier and easier for smaller and smaller companies to invest a little bit and get some value out of it. So it's going to drive job growth. If AI succeeds, it will drive job growth. If it fails, it's going to drive job growth because we're going to have to fill in the gaps here. So either way, software development is going to grow. We're going to have more need for more software developers. And this final point one of the final points in this actual reality is there is no easy path. This is something that too often people get sold on a dream. And I get pushback from people sometimes. They say, well, the reason that you say the things you do, or the reason you push people a certain way, is because you sell courses. And that must mean that you're biased and you're trying to just sell courses. That's not the case. I understand why you would question that. You should question that. But that's not why I do what I do. But too often people have been sold that bill of goods that, hey, if you just watch this course, it will, make your life better because you will be a software developer and you can, do these things. And if you look at how I sell, let's say, my C# master course, which is kind of my cornerstone course, all my master courses are. But when I sell my C# master course, I say that you can walk into it knowing nothing about C#. And when you walk out, you can be a junior or even mid-level C# developer. But there's a difference here. It depends on the effort you put in during the course. If you just watch the videos, you're not even qualified to be a junior developer. You're just not. Because I'm going to encourage you over and over and over throughout that course to build this. Hey, do this homework. And I have people push back and say, where's the answers to the homework? And I say, no, you have to evaluate the answer. You have to figure it out. I've given you all the tools. Now you build something. Because what happens in your job is that you're given a task. You're not given the answer. You have to figure out how to make that work and how to figure out if it matches the requirements. So that's the difference, is that it does take work. It takes a lot of work. And so when I say, hey, if you're going to watch an hour of lecture, you need to spend about 2 to 5 hours actually doing the work, building applications to test out what you just learned. So it's going to take you 2 to 5 times the number of hours of the course in total work to actually get to the point of being a junior or even mid-level developer. It's not about learning syntax. There's a lot more to it. You have to put in the work. There is no easy path. And this comes back to what the lie that AI is selling, and a lot of people are buying, is that AI is the shortcut. Hey, let's take a shortcut to learning software development by just having the AI do it for us. Well, that is super dangerous, because what I see already happening is that people don't know how to be a developer outside of just telling the AI, hey, do this, and then watching it do it. The problem is the AI is wrong way too often, and they don't know it because they're not a developer themselves. They're just a supervisor of an AI who has less and less skill in actually telling the AI, no, you're wrong, because they have less and less insight into that. They don't know what's going on. So there is no easy path. And if you try and shortcut, if you try and take the quicker way that is, have AI do it or have AI help you, well, then what's going to happen is you're going to stunt your growth, and you're going to find out that there isn't a place in software development for you. You won't be able to find a job very easily, if at all, because you're not actually that valuable, because you add nothing to the process. You're just prompting with AI, and that's not useful. Anyone can do that. So finally, This isn't for everyone. I've said before, and people get confused when I say it, but I've said before that anyone can learn software development. Anyone can be a software developer. And people push back on that a lot. And the reason why is they think that it's somehow, super hard to do, or they hold the magical keys for being a developer themselves. But the reality is anyone can do this, but it isn't for everyone. There's a difference there. So anyone can push hard and do this. It's going to take work. It's going to take struggle. It's going to take effort and pushing through the hard things, because being a developer, really, that's kind of the secret, is that we're always struggling, right? It's not, did you have a hard day working through problems? Because that's just a normal Tuesday. That's what we do. That's our job. And the majority of our job is debugging problems and figuring out why things don't work when they expect them to. So this is a job that's going to be frustrating. And for some people, that's energizing. For some people, finding the solution and figuring out how to write that code that solves a problem is life-giving. And for some people, it's just draining. And so this isn't for everyone. So you do need to evaluate, is this for me? If you're just looking at software development as the easy way to get a quick buck, or to become somehow rich by being a software developer, this might not be for you, because that's not what's going to sustain you. Now, if you're willing to put the hard work in, then yeah, you could, but it's not for everyone. Okay, so that's the reality. Let's talk the keys to success as a software developer. Number one, don't take shortcuts. Just don't take shortcuts. AI is a big shortcut, and that's something that we'll talk more about as we go through, but don't use AI as a shortcut. Don't use AI instead of learning. Don't use AI instead of building things yourself or writing the code yourself. So don't take those shortcuts, but there's other shortcuts as well. It used to be that you would spend a lot of time building applications, and now people really push back and they really don't want to build applications. They say, well, I don't want to spend the time, or it takes so long. And yes, it does. And it's hard work, and it's going to take discipline. But you know what? That's how you stand out from the crowd, is that you do the things that others won't. Don't take the shortcuts and just say, well, I'll just vibe code it and call it good. You didn't learn anything there. It's like in a classroom. When I was in high school, I got straight A's. It was super easy for me. And so I never learned how to study. And so when I got to college, that didn't translate so well. I remember my freshman class, I took Calculus 1. The very first thing that happened was I failed Calculus 1 because I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to put the effort in beyond just listening to a lecture and regurgitating it onto the page. And that's not how college works, especially not that class. So that's when I learned that I have to learn how to do the work. I had to learn how to not just watch something and then regurgitate it, which is what some people do with videos. They just watch it and expect to then know it. That's not how that works. What you have to do is you have to figure out what are the ways to get this information to stick in my brain, and how do I get the experience in these areas in order to really grasp the concepts. So for me in calculus, one of the things was I had to take notes. And I found that typing notes wasn't going to work, because when I did, I focused too much on formatting and should I do bullet points here and how do I put a diagram over here? I can't really. So I spent too much time formatting. Instead, what I learned was get out a piece of paper and a pen and write things down. Sometimes just the very act of writing it down would help solidify things in my brain. But then I'd also take those notes and practice. I would do my homework, which wasn't graded. And so before I didn't do my homework because why do something that's not graded? Well, I figured out why. Because it's the practice. It's the idea of doing this over and over so it becomes muscle memory. And so I learned that I couldn't take shortcuts to success. I had to take the long road, because that's how I became an A student in calculus, is by not taking the shortcuts, but taking the long road, doing the things that are hard and frustrating and quite frankly, I didn't want to do. Take notes and spend time outside of class working on this and practicing this and doing problems over and over again until I figured out how it worked and I was able to commit that into my muscle memory. So don't take shortcuts in software development. Don't let AI lead. This is really the dividing line between you're in serious trouble as a developer and you are going to do well as a developer. And that is, does AI lead or not? Because if you allow AI to lead, what happens is more and more you will just be signing off on what AI does. When AI gives you 500 lines of new C# code that it's written, how well do you actually review that code? Do you refactor it? Do you evaluate the security of it? Do you evaluate does it fit into the overall whole? Or do you go, hey, it works? Because the more you lean towards, hey, it works, the more you lean towards just rubber stamping what the AI does, the less value you are as a developer. Because quite frankly, there's probably people that can explain the problems better than you can. And so that's all you're doing at that point is explaining the problems to the AI. You're not actually evaluating if the AI fulfilled the solution to the problems. So that's an important thing, is that dividing line, don't let AI lead. Also, put in the hard work. This comes back to number one, no shortcuts, but put in the hard work. Make sure that you are spending the time, because this is how you stand out from the crowd. If you put in the hard work, that's something that the vast majority of developers will not do. And in fact, there's probably people watching this video right now. I know there's people watching this video right now. They're going, yeah, it's just too hard. I don't want to do that. It takes up too much of my time. I don't want to spend my off hours working on software development. Guess what? You want to be a person that goes beyond that person so you can stand out from everybody else. So put in the hard work. Also, do what others will not do. There are some things that people who are in development just don't want to do. And they're going to push it off on anybody else. And the problem there is that while that may work, what's going to happen is they become less and less valuable compared to the person who does what others will not. A prime example of this is if you go to a database developer conference, which I have done. I've spoken at developer conferences for database development. And you talk to the people, and a lot of database developers will say that they're actually a software developer first, and they became the database developer, or they're an accidental DBA. That's a pretty common term you'll hear a lot. And the reason for that is because, first of all, they knew something about databases. And so they were using that knowledge at work to aid in their job beyond the just software developer role. But also, they were willing to take that on. And because of that, they became even more valuable to their organization. They did what others would not. And that's just one example out of many. There's also people who figure out how to make automation and DevOps work. There are people who figure out how to improve performance in cloud while reducing costs. There are people who figure out how to use containers to make applications easier to work with locally. There's people that figure out these other things, these other areas that are at the edges of software development, and because of that become more valuable to their organization. Do what others will not. And finally, continual growth. This is a big key to success. Too often I see developers who stagnate in their role. They think that, well, I'm getting better at doing our internal system. That's great in a sense, but here's the thing. You might not have that job forever. Your company might not be around forever. Your role might not be around forever. And what happens when you lose that role or want to leave that role or get frustrated with the new management and the new direction? You're behind the curve because you stopped growing. And it's really hard to pick up, especially when other people have been keeping up this entire time. And so they launch way ahead of you just by putting in the continual work. It's, you don't take a break during a marathon. You don't stop at mile 5 and just go, you know what? I'm going to hang out here for a while, because it's really hard to then place in the top 10 of that marathon because everyone else has been making consistent progress throughout the race, where you're sitting down and just hanging out. So continual growth is the final key of success for software development. Let's talk about the bottom line here. The bottom line is that software development takes hard work. It takes determination to push through the hard parts, which not everyone can do. If you're not willing to do that, this career probably isn't for you. So, you know what? There's no shame in saying, this isn't my career. This isn't what I want to do. That's totally fine. Now, for the rest of you, I would encourage you to look at this the other way, is that, you know what? I'm going to put in the hard work. I'm going to have determination. I'm going to push through because this is the career for me. I'm willing to do that, but I'm willing to put up with the work that a job really is in order to get the rewards that I'm looking forward to. Now, let's jump into goals for software developers at different levels. So we'll talk first about new developers. If you're thinking about being a software developer or you're just getting started in software development, these are some goals you should have. Number one, we're talking specifically for C# here, but learn C# beyond the syntax. Too often people think when they first get into software development that when you know more syntax, you must be a senior developer. That is not it at all. A junior developer might know almost every bit of syntax in C#. So that's not what makes you a senior developer. So go beyond just being a senior developer, and then don't rely on AI tooling. So what you're going to do is you're going to start building things, start learning how to actually build applications. Too often I see people who say, oh, well, I know C# really well. And I ask, well, have you built an application? Well, no, I haven't built an application. I just don't have time. It's a lot of work, and I don't have the right idea or whatever. No, learn how to build things, because that's what a software developer does. So, and then with that, don't rely on AI tooling. Don't rely on it at all. In fact, if you're learning software development, uninstall the AI tools, disable them, don't use them. Because what it's going to do if you start using them is it's going to be a crutch to kind of fill in the gaps you think, but what's actually happening is it's creating gaps. It's allowing you to continue when, in fact, you have gaps and you don't even realize because it works. And so what happens is that when you go to actually build something without an AI tool, you figure out, I can't build that. I don't know how to build that. I'm missing so much stuff because you allowed gaps into your knowledge. So don't do that. Just turn it off. It's not the right time for you. Later, that's fine. And you're not going to miss anything. You're not going to be stunted. You're not going to be behind the curve because you haven't learned AI tools yet. Learn the actual language first. Learn how to build in it. Learn well beyond the syntax of it. Build real things. Build real things without AI. Learn how to work with this so that you know how to actually use the language. You know how things work. You know how things are architected. You know how things fit together. You know the questions to ask when you do eventually, not now, but eventually start using AI tooling. You know the questions to ask to say, hey, I don't think that's right. Or, hey, what about the security there? What about the data protection there? What about cross-contamination between two different companies in our database? These are really important questions to know how to ask. And the only way you'll know how to ask them well is if you've actually built things. It's not if you've read enough books. It's have you actually got practical hands-on knowledge? If you're going to go to a surgeon and you need to have your leg operated on, you don't want to go to a surgeon who says, yes, I've watched all the tutorials. I've read all the books about this. I'm sure I can do this. That's not who you want. Who you want is a person who says, I've done this 100 times, not a problem, this is what we're going to do. I had that happen with my wisdom teeth. So I was older and still had my wisdom teeth, but they were causing problems. And so I went to a surgeon who's going to take my wisdom teeth out, and he did not have a whole lot of confidence in his own technique, because the fact he said, oh, well, you're older and this could happen. I mean, he was giving some really scary things about how I might, lose or might hit a nerve in my jaw. I might not be able to, smile correctly ever since. I might cause problems where I might break my jaw. All these things that might happen because he had not done this procedure on a person of my age almost ever. It was a very rare thing for him to do. And so I went, you know what? No, not going to do that. But then I went to a different surgeon. And he said, first of all, I've done this a number of times, people your age, not a problem. Here's what we're going to do and why. And he had a whole bunch of research. He'd done a whole bunch of learning. So he could quote articles and quote statistics, and he could, point me to the journals where it talks about how to do this and why to do this and what the outcomes are and so on. But he also had a whole bunch of hands-on experience of having done it. Guess what? I felt very confident. When it comes to companies hiring developers, they don't want the first person. They want the second person. They don't want a person who says, yeah, I've watched a ton of tutorials. I've seen this done a number of times. What they want is a person that says, yeah, I've done a bunch of research and I know how these work and why this works and how to do this, but I've also built a number of things. That's what you want to be, because that's what employers are looking for. So for new developers, those are my top 3 things for your goals. Now, for job seekers, maybe you've already been a software developer for a bit, or maybe you're just starting off looking for a job. You now have the qualifications you think to be a software developer. Either way, if you're looking for a job, here's some goals for you. Stand out from the crowd. Too often, I have people argue with me and say, well, I don't want to do that. That's a whole lot of work. Or I don't want to, put in that extra effort. And so what they tell me is, I'm going to do the same exact thing as every other job seeker out there, but I'm going to expect different results. Does that sound logical to you? If the job market is full of developers looking for jobs, and there's a lot of developers looking for jobs right now, and if the job market isn't booming like it was 5 years ago, and it's not, even though there's still jobs there, it's just not nearly as empty as it used to be. Well, if there's less job openings and lots of people looking for jobs, you can't do the same thing as everybody else and expect different results. You have to figure out how to be the person that stands out from the crowd from the get-go. That means standing out just with your resume, standing out the very first time you interview, standing out when you do a technical interview. You need to stand out when you talk to an employer. These are all things that you need to figure out how to do to stand out from the crowd. And that means doing things that other people are not doing. This does not mean wacky shenanigans. This does not mean making your resume into a multicolored clown-themed, thing where you open up the piece of paper and balloons fly out. This is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is ways to show off that you're a better developer, that you are more experienced, that you can do more, you can offer more to the company than anybody else who's applying. Number 2, show off what you can do. This is one way to stand out, is to show off what you can do. And that means you have to have built something. That's what you're doing already, right? Like, these are things you need to do. Number 3, make connections. We'll talk more about this, but as a software developer, yes, it's important that you make connections, because that will make your job seeking ability easier. It will make that process quicker. It will give you more opportunities to move up and move around in software development because of the fact that it's who you know. Now, you don't have to know anybody in order to become a software developer and get hired, but it makes it a whole lot easier. And so, yeah, statistically, Generally speaking, software developers are introverts. That's kind of how, what type of person is attracted to this field. People who expect that they're going to keep their head down and just work on their computer and no one's going to talk to them. That's not really how the job works, but that's the expectation, and that's what a lot of software developers is introverts. I'm not saying everybody is, but you need to figure out how to overcome that. I'm an introvert. That's at my core, that's who I am. I have learned through hard work how to make connections. So working to, connect with people, it's really hard, but you need to put the effort in order to make those connections, because that will make your life easier. So work to make those connections. Practice interviewing. That's really important. Practice interviewing. Interview the person who knows nothing about software development, because guess what? Your first interview will probably be with a person who knows nothing about software development. So give your friend who has no clue, or your spouse, or your brother or sister, your parent, give them the job description and your resume and say, can you interview me for this role? And then have them ask questions, and they're going to ask bad questions. Guess what? So is HR. And then ask them, how do I come across? Do you think I meet these expectations? What do you think I could do better to meet these expectations more? And they're going to say things that you're going to want to push back against. For example, they may say, well, this role is for a .NET developer, and you say you're a C# developer. I don't see how that aligns. And you might go, oh my goodness, C# is .NET. Don't get angry, because that's exactly what the HR person is going to say, only they're not going to say it to you. They're going to think that as they put you through a filter. So learn how to make adjustments based upon that. Learn from those experiences. Do practice interviews where you do technical interviews. I did a whole course on this. This is not it's kind of a plug, but I did a course on this where I gave you 100 questions and allowed you to take the time to answer 5 questions at a time, 20 times, where I give you 5 questions and I give you the 5 answers that I would answer it like, but that gives you the opportunity to practice the interview process. But I think it's important. You'll notice that the courses that I do, I feel are really important for software developers. I'm not here to try to, trick you into doing things that are not good for you. I'm here to give you the tools necessary to do the things that you need to in order to become a better software developer. That's why I have so many courses that are building real applications. I have courses that are, let's dive deep into beyond just the syntax of C# or web development, because I want you to know more. I want you to become a better developer. And part of this is practicing every part of the process, from when you first learn the first bit of C# syntax all the way through practicing your interviewing. So next up, customize your resume. Again, going back to that first point, stand out from the crowd. Too often, people turn in generic resumes to hundreds of jobs and go, man, nobody's hired me because nobody even contacted me. Guess what? If they didn't contact you, your resume wasn't good enough. Now, it may be that you don't have the skills necessary for that job. That may be, but more likely, it's the fact that you did not put in a good enough job on making your resume fit the job that you're applying to. Make it easy for them to say yes. Okay? When you just give a generic resume and say, well, it's just too hard to customize. Yep. And you know what? You're not going to have a job because you're not going to get the interviews. If you're going through 100+ applications and getting 1 or less interviews, it's probably on you. I'm sorry that's harsh, it's direct, but it's probably on you, because this is not a matter of, oh, they're fake jobs. Most likely not. Most likely not. The fake jobs, they're trying to scam you in some way. These aren't scams. When it's on Indeed, it's not a scam. What they're trying to do is trying to find the best people for the job, and your resume isn't matching that. I know because I've read thousands of them. And I can tell you that when I've had thousands of resumes for one job, that the vast majority of them were easily rejected in round one before I even talked to the person because they had no match to what I was saying. This is what I'm looking for. So figure out how to make your resume match, because you can't expect an employer to talk to every person or evaluate in depth every particular person and tease the information out of you. That's not how it works. You need to stand out from the crowd, so customize your resume. So those are the goals for job seekers. Let's talk about current developers. Maybe you're in a role and you're like, you know what? I'm set. I got a job. I can probably skip this whole thing. No, you can't. Don't skip this. So here's your goals. Supplement with AI. This is where I first would say that AI can be valuable. Is when you're in a current role, when you are skilled, you're not a junior developer anymore, maybe you're a mid-level or hopefully more towards senior developer, supplement your development with AI. Again, don't let it lead, but supplement your development with AI. It can be really valuable. Number two, continue to grow. And that doesn't mean let the AI teach you. What it means is continue to add new skills, continue to practice, and go back to the basics. Again, don't let AI be anywhere involved in the growth process because it can leave gaps. It will leave gaps. It will leave you a bad understanding of a topic, even though it looks great. And maybe 95% of what it will teach you would be great. That 5%, there's some bad gaps there that can cause some serious problems that make it almost not worth it to learn it at all. So get AI out of the process, continue to grow in new areas. Put in the hard work. It's going to take some hard work. You're going to have to probably work outside of your 9-to-5 job. And I know people don't love to do that, but here's the deal. Is your career important? Because this field is hard. This field is not just a bed of roses where if you just put in your time and punch the time clock that they will somehow give you magically lots of money. That's not how it works. Companies are always looking for more. And so if you don't put the work in, you're going to find that you're unemployed. I know a lot of people who are senior developers or say they are, who don't have a job. And they're struggling to get the next job because they got laid off. And all of a sudden, now they don't have the skills necessary for the current market. And they're struggling because they have not kept up. They didn't put the hard work in. Now they're faced with either I do a lot of hard work or I don't get a job. And even when I do the hard work, it's kind of like I sat down at that 5-mile marker in the marathon. There's a lot of people ahead of me. So put in the hard work even in your current role. And prepare for a change. Your job may not be there forever. In fact, most jobs probably won't be there forever. It doesn't matter if you work for a huge company or a tiny little company. Your job probably won't be there forever. So those are your goals as a current developer. Let's talk now about technology and what technologies you should know. So whether you're a brand new developer or you're a seasoned senior developer, these are things you should know, and maybe you'll find yourself on different parts of this spectrum. So first, let's talk about the language. And primarily, we're going to talk C# here. So this is all about .NET, but specifically C#. Learn .NET 6 through 10, okay? You don't have to know every .NET, but you should be comfortable working not just in the cutting edge, but in older versions of .NET as well. So just spin up older projects. Make sure you know how to navigate them and how to work with them, because not every company is going to upgrade to the latest cutting edge version of .NET. I highly encourage, if you're on .NET, to be on .NET 10, but not every company will do that. Also, learn .NET Framework. I know you may not want to, and you may say, I'm not going to work on .NET Framework, so I'm not going to even worry about it. You are limiting your career. That's just how it is, because there's a lot of companies out there that are working on .NET Framework. There's a lot of companies out there that are using WinForms in .NET Framework and Web Forms as well. Guess what? Those aren't fun frameworks. But you know what? That gets you a foot in the door, it gets you experience, and it allows you to be the hero in that company where you can start moving them, migrating them towards .NET 10 and beyond. So learn .NET Framework. Learn how to work with APIs. The web is increasingly valuable. We're increasingly connected with every application we build. And so knowing how to build an API is important. And part of that has to do with the fact that if you have an API, you can connect it to other services, including AIs. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to work with more. And with that, learn how to integrate AI into your applications. It's a great skill to have in your back pocket. Now, this is not a skill you add if you're a brand new C# developer, but if you're a mid-level or above developer, yeah, learn how to embed AI into your C# application. I did a whole course on this. Again, I do courses to help you meet the needs of today. So learn how to integrate an AI into your application. You may not love it. You may not think that it's valuable. And for the most part, I do think there is limited value in integrating an AI into an application. But what are you trying to do? Are you trying to make a moral stand or a stand about, what is right? Or are you trying to get a job? Are you trying to work with an employer? And an employer might say, we want to do this. Or you might say, well, yeah, I can integrate an AI into a C# application. And that might be the added push that a company needs. They might say, you know what? We want to do that at some point. So having a person on staff that can do that'd be great. All of a sudden, you have put yourself ahead of your competition. You're standing out. Learn ASP.NET Core. And too many people don't understand what ASP.NET Core is. That is API. That's also MVC. That's also Razor Pages, but it's also Blazor Web Apps and Blazor WebAssembly. All of those are built on the same core of ASP.NET Core. So learn it. Learn how to use it. Learn how to integrate different pieces together. Learn how to put a Blazor bit into an MVC application. Because you may work in a company that has MVC, and they might say, well, we want to, just have a little bit of client-side functionality. Well, you really don't want to have this whole JavaScript system in place with NPM and all the rest in order to just put a little bit of client-side interactivity on a form or two. This is where a Blazor bit would be really helpful. You just drop that in, use the same language, and you're done. So learning how those things interact with each other, really important. Learn cross-platform. More and more, I think we're going to see that people are moving away from just Windows. I think that Windows is pushing people pretty hard away from Windows. And so learning how to do cross-platform development with C#, really important. There's different ways of doing that. So Microsoft has their own with MAUI, and you can either use a XAML syntax or you can use a Blazor syntax and build for Windows and Mac desktop, as well as iOS and Android. Or you can use a third-party tool like Uno or Avalonia, and you can build cross-platform on Windows and Mac and Linux desktops, as well as iOS and Android and the web. So you get to choose which works for you. Personally, I lean towards Uno a lot because of the fact that it does deploy to more platforms and it does have the complete vertical integration with all the different tooling that it has. I've done a video on that. We'll probably do more videos on that. But learn cross-platform because it opens up more possibilities. It makes you more valuable. That's the whole point here, is to get you to stand out from the crowd. So when an interviewer says, you've worked on C#, so you probably haven't done much, except for on Windows, you could say, I actually built for Linux desktops before. And they might say, really? Yeah, I used Uno to do that. And this is what I did. All of a sudden you stand out. Okay, learn Aspire. Aspire is a tool from Microsoft that I've done an intro video. We'll do more videos on it in this coming year. But it's a tool for helping you work with these complex applications locally and learning how to see all the interactions with the tracing and the logging and all these other things in one place locally, so it makes working with complex applications easier. So I would encourage you, learn it, learn how to work with it, because it will make your life easier as a developer, but it's also going to, again, help you stand out in a crowded marketplace. Next up, let's talk about supporting tooling. So DevOps, deploying applications in general, knowing how to do that. Again, we talked before with the accidental DBA. I think the new term is probably accidental DevOps engineer, because as developers, we kind of know our way around technology. And one of the areas that's become more and more on the developers is deploying our applications. So knowing how to, work with GitHub Actions or work with other tooling to get your software from the source code all the way to production is important. Learning how to do CI/CD, learning how to work with actions and work with the YAML and figure out how that all works. It's a valuable thing to know how to do, and it adds more value. Number 2, containers. Whether you like them or not, containers are the future for the cloud. And because of that, they're also the future for development in general. In fact, if you deploy an Azure web app where you say, here's my source code, deploy that to a web server in Azure, what you're actually doing is deploying to a container. Even if you don't use a containerized version, it's still a container, because that's how the cloud works. And as an extension, that's how development will work in general, because of the fact that you're often deploying to the cloud. And even if you're not deploying to the cloud, it makes life easier. I've done a number of videos on a number of different ways where you can run 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines of code, and all of a sudden you could have a SQL server, a MongoDB database, or you can have a Redis cache, or whatever else you want locally running on your machine with very little work. And at the end of it, you can turn it off and it goes away. Super valuable. Learn how to work with them. It will add value to your employer. Databases. Too often, databases get overlooked as, we store data there. And people will work really hard to optimize, their for loops and optimize, this specific code and try to figure out how to save, half a nanosecond off of working with this bit of code. And they forget that they're accessing a data from a database. That's where the vast majority of your performance will be won or lost, is talking to your database, getting the data out. Learn how to let the database do database work. Too often, developers want to just dump all the data down to their application and then do filtering and sorting. That's not efficient. Learn how to let, let's say, SQL do SQL work, and learn what work SQL should do on its side versus what work you should do on your side. Learn how to optimize, learn how to secure your data. And that's not just password security. That's also making sure you don't cross-contaminate data, making sure queries can't access more than they should, making sure that your connection strings are locked down, and so many other things. So learn how to work with databases, and not just one, multiple. Cloud management. This is a similar thing here. Learning how to work with the cloud is going to add a lot of value because of the fact that the cloud can be wildly expensive for employers. Wildly expensive. Or it can be much, much cheaper than doing it yourself. So learn how to work with the cloud. Learn how to manage resources. Learn when the cloud is the right choice. Learn when it's the wrong choice. Learn how to optimize your performance in the cloud as well as your monetary performance. Learn how to monitor how much you're spending and so many other things. Cloud management is really important, because if you come to your employer and say, I want to work with Azure, let's deploy to Azure, your employer rightfully is going to say, that sounds expensive. We've got our self-hosting here. It's fine. You can come back with, here is why it's cheaper. I've done this for companies where, one company I worked for, they had their servers. It was actually, they were renting full servers from, I believe, Rackspace. So it was actually somebody else's server, but they were renting the full thing, doing the Windows updates themselves, etc. We went from that to fully in the cloud with a redundant zone, with more resources, with more performance, with more everything for a fraction of the cost. Because I knew how to make the cloud work for my employer. Guess what? My employer was thrilled. And I've done that multiple times. Because if you know what you're doing, you can stand out from the crowd by providing value and not just danger and costs and all the rest. Learn AI dev tools, okay? At some point, and this is not when you're a rookie developer, this is when you are solidified as a software developer, learn dev tools. Now, right now, AI development tools like Claude or Copilot, etc., these tools are moving very, very fast, and they're constantly changing which LLM they're using and how they're working and the tooling. And it's a moving target right now. Don't worry about diving too deep into the tooling because it's just changing. But learn how to use them, learn how to get value out of them. Because again, you're looking to provide value for your employer. And so when you're talking to a person who's interviewing you for a technical interview, you can talk about the AI tooling and talk about what you know and how you've worked with it and what pitfalls you found, as well as how you've learned to work around those. Because employers don't want to hear, oh, it's great, I just tell what to do and it just does it and does my job for me. That's not what employers want to hear, because what they're hearing is you provide no value. But instead, if you say, this is what I found and this is how I've learned to optimize it, what you're saying is, here's how I drive the AI to make me more efficient and effective while still providing value. So learn how to do that. So those are the supporting tools. Let's talk about the supporting languages. Because yes, when you learn a language, and I encourage you to learn C#, if that's your primary language, learn it really well. Again, syntax is not enough. Learn how to actually implement it. Learn how to build things with it. But after you do that, to an extent, you're going to have to learn other languages. That's what developers do. And in fact, someday, maybe you'll find you're not even developing C# anymore. But while you are, even still, you'll be learning more languages than just C#. HTML and CSS. Those are two, and you can debate, well, it's not a programming language. It kind of is. Either way, they're languages. Either way, you need to know them more than just, I know how to do a div and I know how to change the font color. You need to learn them a whole lot more deeply than that. Learn them well. With that, JavaScript. And here's a pitfall that a lot of people jump into. They say, I haven't learned JavaScript, but I use Angular. Don't do that. Learn JavaScript first. Vanilla JavaScript, meaning just JavaScript, not a framework. Learn JavaScript because those frameworks change all the time and they're built on a foundation of JavaScript. So when you know JavaScript, know how it works, you know what hoisting is, you know how it interacts with other things, you know what let versus const versus var means, you know these things and why they're important, then you can make wise choices around what you do. And that's the same thing is true if you're going to go into TypeScript. That's fine, great. TypeScript can be great, but learn JavaScript first so you know what it's doing. Otherwise, what you end up with is a knowledge base that's full of holes that you don't provide an effective query against your code to go, hey, there's some problems here, or hey, there's a bug. You don't know how to do that very well because of the fact that you've got a whole bunch of holes in your knowledge. And again, what you're going to end up doing is letting the AI lead, and you're back to you're not very valuable as a developer. So learn JavaScript well. T-SQL. Learning, this is kind of stand-in for any database query language. Okay, if you're using MongoDB, there's a MongoDB syntax. Whatever the syntax is, learn how to use it well. So T-SQL is what we use for a lot of different SQL engines, but Microsoft SQL Server. Learn the T-SQL. Learn more than just the select from and where query. learn a lot deeper than that. Learn how to effectively use T-SQL to optimize your query. Again, this is where the performance of your application is won or lost. And finally, I'm putting this in here as a language. Too often people avoid the command line interface, CLI. Too often people will avoid it because they say, well, that's just so old. It's not. We talked earlier about DevOps. Do you know what you're going to have to do in DevOps? You're going to have to perform a series of command line arguments, command line statements. How do you know how to do that? By knowing what the command line is and how it works. Knowing the command line can make you faster. Every Git tool is based upon the command line. And too often, what happens is you'll get to use a Git tool, and it's great, and it works great, but there's this one little edge case where you're like, oh, it takes like 5 steps and doing things all over in order to do this one thing. And more often than not, it's a one-liner in the command line. And if you know that, you can supplement your Git GUI with Git CLI and just do the one-liner and done. I have done this for years where I've got a Git tool that I like and I use it for the most things, but there's one thing that I just don't like. And so I'll drop down that CLI, make that one command, and I'm back up, I'm going. The same thing is true for .NET. You can do almost any .NET command as far as creating new files or adding new projects or linking things together, adding packages and so on. You can do all those things with the command line. That can be much faster. But also having those skills allows you to be better at DevOps. It allows you to be better at automation. And so again, it helps you stand out from your peers. Okay, so those are the kind of the goals, things to learn and know. Let's talk now about your career. Your career is important, and managing your career is very important. So first of all, key characteristics, you need to be broadly knowledgeable. Okay, so as a developer, yes, you should be deeply knowledgeable about C# if you're a C# developer, but you also need to be broadly knowledgeable. You should understand what's going on in the industry around us. You should understand what is a container and how does it work, even if you don't use it every day. Even if you don't use it at all, you should know what it is and why it's valuable. At least at that level, be broadly knowledgeable. So you have a conversation and be able to say, you know what, I don't use this, but I understand that, this is valuable for this. And so I don't do that area of things, but, if I were going to, this is what I would do. Number 2, be skilled at identifying flaws in AI suggestions. If you work with the AI and build something, and if you can't find a flaw, the flaw is probably you're not yet skilled enough to work with the AI, because the AI is almost always inserting little flaws or inserting little problems. The big one here is that when you're working with any size code base at all, it's not going to take the larger picture in mind. It just can't. It doesn't have enough tokens to put the entire application in its memory, which means it's going to not realize that certain methods aren't there, or it's going to hallucinate that certain methods are there, or it's not going to follow the same patterns as the rest of your application, or it's going to miss certain things. You need to be able to evaluate that and identify those flaws. And as those flaws get bigger, you need to make sure that you identify those, because too many applications that I've seen launched recently have had major security problems that make your application vulnerable, and by extension, anyone who is a client of your application, every one of your customers becomes vulnerable. And that can be business killing. So you need to be absolutely certain you understand how to identify flaws in any AI suggestion you take, or you shouldn't use AI. Number 3, you should be aware of the big picture. When you're working on an application, too often you get heads down and focus on this one little bug. You need to be able to pick your head up and understand the big picture, because when you do, you can make better decisions about what the right choice is for that particular situation. Because maybe you can make a simple change here that does this, and that's fine in the context of just that little bit. But if you look at the bigger picture, you realize that doesn't serve the overall whole. And by being better at being big picture aware, you can be better in meetings when you're talking to your boss and say, hey, that sounds great, but here's why it's going to impact something else over there. And you become more of a leader in software development. Be hardworking. When an employer is thinking about their best employees, they don't think of the employees that slack off. They don't think, you know what, I want more of those people. What they think is that Jill, she works really hard. I like that. Even if she punches in at 8 o'clock and punches out at 5 o'clock, she works really hard when she's here. You know what? Be that person. Show off that you can be that person, because that's what an employer is going to value. Even if they don't say it, even if it feels like they are not paying attention to you, still be hardworking. It will pay off. And then don't be a whiner, okay? Too often I see people that are just complainers. You know, they complain to their boss, they complain to their coworkers, they complain about the problems and all the rest. But guess what? That doesn't leave a good taste in anybody's mouth. When you think about, hey, you know what? We've got layoffs coming soon, and we're going to have to lay off half the people. Who do you think is getting laid off? The person who is whining all the time, or the person who's a hard worker? And yes, there's more that goes into that decision, but if it comes down to that, you want to be a person that's hardworking. You want to be a person that is just known for being a complainer, because a complainer takes energy away. Don't just take energy away. Put energy into everyone around you. Okay, let's talk about an improvement plan. Number one, solve a real problem with an application. So if you're looking to improve your career, number one, solve a real problem with an application. Find some problem that you have and solve it. Okay. There are so many problems. I have people tell me all the time, oh, I just can't figure out a problem. Maybe you're not building enough applications. Maybe you're not, working enough with software development, because the more you start working with software development, the more you start actually building real things, and the more you start, working through training and all the rest, you're going to find things. Maybe it's just you figure out a way to track your training. Maybe it is that you find a flaw in something that you don't like and you do something better. Okay. I did a video not that long ago about how I built a little this image viewer because I found that there wasn't good solutions out there that fit exactly what I needed. I solved the real problem. It wasn't a big problem, but I solved the real problem. And that made me faster at doing my recording and doing this work. Well, guess what? If I had a boss looking over my shoulder, I could show them that and say, hey, this is what I built, and it saves me a few minutes every time I do a video. That can be of value. Attend a meetup. Software developers tend to be introverted. They tend to focus on, hey, I don't want to talk to people. I want to just put my head down. Don't do that. Attend a meetup. Meet other developers. You will find that it puts your career forward just by meeting other people, because you'll start talking about what you're doing and what they're doing, and you will learn new things, and you will just grow by talking to others and getting an outside perspective and seeing how they do things. So just that alone will be of value. But then if you do need a job, you have a network of people that are working as developers who would know of any openings for jobs. And you'll have someone that can say, hey, I know Tim and he's a developer, and pass that on to their boss. All of a sudden you've bypassed round one of the interview process. You still have to go through the rest of the rounds, but you've at least gotten a leg up against all of the rest of your competition. You have stood out from the crowd. So attend a meetup. It's also just good for your career because you're going to start learning and growing in just what you're learning in that meetup as well. So please do that. Also, keep your resume current. Keep working on how many years experience do you have, what skills have you learned, what things should drop off your resume, and keep that master resume, that main resume that you have, fresh with all the information. Remember, you're going to customize that resume to just the important bits for any given application, any given job application, but you want to have that main resume up to date at all times. It's just, you're ready to go. It also helps you go, I haven't really done anything recently. And that's your kind of kick in the pants and go do something. Add 3 new skills. Add 3 new skills to your list of skills and things that you know about. You don't have to go in depth yet, but learn 3 new things. Push yourself to go beyond just what you do at your day job. Expand your abilities. And then experiment. So experiment with new things, try new things, figure out what works and what doesn't work. Work on an improvement plan so that you are improving as a developer and you are learning what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work. So even if you didn't add a new skill to your resume, but you try it out, you can have a conversation about that. Say, you know what? I tried that out. It just didn't work for me. Here's why. And have that conversation. Okay. Next up, the bottom line. So here's the bottom line for this whole video, and that is that software development is changing. You need to be able to be more than just a prompt engineer to get and maintain a job. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort on your part to get your job, to maintain your job, to be better at your job, but it's worth it. This career, this field is awesome. And if you like being in here, then you're going to have to put the work in to stay here, but it's going to pay off. It's going to be rewarding. So follow this. I hope that you have a great 2026. Dive in and make this the best year ever for your software development career.